Synopsis: My mother married me off to a rich young man, only to find out that he is paralyzed from the waist down. On the wedding night, I carefully asked him a very serious question: "Do you need me to carry you to bed?" He smiled faintly, his tone indifferent. "I'm sorry to trouble you." I rolled up my sleeves and bent down to prepare to carry him. Unexpectedly, before I could stand firm, we both lost our balance and fell face down on the ground. I was just a little bit away from being able to inherit a fortune worth thousands of billions. After graduating from university, my mother quickly married me off to a wealthy man, with a bride price exceeding tens of millions. I heard that the other party is a genuine second-generation rich kid, who became paralyzed due to an accident and was also stripped of his inheritance rights in the family. Now there is still money, and time is abundant, but my mother is worried, pulling my hand and whispering, "I heard he is not only paralyzed but also can't do that anymore." My eyes immediately lit up. It was indeed good news, rich and free, with a husband who is paralyzed and also impotent. What could be better than that? So my mother and I split the bride price, happily preparing to marry off. Why would I agree to marry a disabled person? Of course, it's for the money, a reason that is both straightforward and practical, nothing to deny. On the wedding day, even though I had prepared myself early, I still couldn't avoid feeling nervous. The groom's family needed a wife who was like a mobile flower vase, not demanding, not binding, while my mother and I needed money. Both sides just happened to meet each other's needs, and everything was decided neatly and decisively. Thus, until today, this is the first time my husband and I have met. Before the wedding ceremony began, my mother pushed me into the groom's resting room and said very seriously, "This is to give you two some time to cultivate your feelings. There are only 10 minutes left to go on stage. How can you cultivate feelings in time?" I walked in with my wedding dress, just about to think about how to start a conversation when I suddenly froze. Didn't they say the other party was disabled, impotent, and very pitiful? So who was the elegant man sitting in the wheelchair in front of me? The black suit was tailored perfectly, and the white shirt was intentionally unbuttoned at 2 collar buttons, revealing a distinct collarbone. Even while sitting, his back was straight. He exuded a cold and arrogant aura. I looked closer and discovered that his face was so beautiful it took one's breath away. No amount of flowery language could fully describe it. My hands trembled, the wedding dress got caught on my legs, and I lost my balance, awkwardly kneeling in front of him. I looked up and stammered, asking, "If I said I went into the wrong room, would you believe me?" Since I entered, he had leisurely assessed me from head to toe. One person sitting comfortably in a wheelchair, while another struggled kneeling on the ground, his gaze finally landed on the wedding dress. "It's the dress you sent to my house." Guess what he said? "I guess not. He is only paralyzed in his legs, not his brain." To break the awkward atmosphere, I hurriedly stood up and admitted, "My mother told me to come in here to cultivate feelings with you." He chuckled softly, glanced at the watch on his wrist, then lazily said, "Well, 5 minutes is enough to go on stage." Thinking of the fact that the person in front of me was the main sponsor of the party, I immediately became more serious and cautiously asked, "Is there anything I need to pay attention to during the wedding?" Inside, I was screaming, "Hurry and give me your demands, throw out as many conditions as possible, and then increase the money." But he just glanced at me, casually loosened his shirt collar, and said lazily, "No need, you just need to obediently be a mobile flower vase." "Yes." I responded obediently, standing aside in silence, but my eyes were disobedient, sneaking glances at him. I was shallow, I was wrong, I truly regret being happy when I heard he was impotent. A face that is hard to look away from yet cannot do that. It's a pity. The wedding went very smoothly. Being a mobile flower vase was indeed not difficult. I just needed to puff out my chest, suck in my stomach, keep a perfect smile under the stage lights, and stand until the ceremony ended to consider my mission complete. It seems that Vicelang was quite satisfied with my performance. After the wedding banquet ended, he was a bit tipsy and casually handed me a bank card. He didn't say what it was for, nor did he mention the balance, but his attitude indicated that this was definitely a bonus. The young master of the Faux family surely wouldn't be a small amount. I immediately took the card, and after a while, I suddenly remembered that I forgot to ask for the password. In addition to the card and the password he just gave, he also casually threw me a bunch of keys along with a piece of paper with the address and phone number. Then he got into his private car and left, telling me to take a taxi home, but I had no intention of going back to the wealthy young master's villa. Holding the bank card in my hand, the first thing I did was run straight to the nearest ATM. Standing in front of the cash machine, my hands trembled with excitement. But with a balance of 100 yuan, it's really a pity, not a fortune. I stared at the screen for a long time until the person behind me impatiently urged me. Sister, you still have 100 yuan, and you're hesitating for so long? Or do you need to burn incense and pray before you're willing to withdraw? I blushed as I took out the card, still unwilling, and dragged myself to the nearby counter to ask again. The result was still 100. He really knows how to play. If there are no feelings, there's no need to say anything. But anyway, I have already worn a wedding dress weighing dozens of kilograms and married you once. And yet, you only added 100 yuan. This must be for beggars. The more I think about it, the angrier I get. I withdrew exactly that 100 yuan, then decided to use this money of yours just to spite you. I immediately called 3 taxis, one for me to sit in, and the other 2 followed behind for effect. But I miscalculated. I didn't expect the Faux family's villa to be so far away. The 3 taxis cost over 400 yuan in total, 100 spent clean, and I had to dig out over 300 from my pocket to make up for it. What bad luck. That night on our wedding night, I sat on the sofa, staring at Fo Lang's beautifully sculpted face. But right now, no matter how I look at him, I feel angry. While I was muttering curses in my heart, Fo Lang suddenly turned to look at me. Tjai Nian, I said, yes, it's me. The moment the assistant spoke, I immediately became as obedient as a cat. Fo Lang's gaze on my face was light and indifferent, yet it made me feel a chill down my spine. Our eyes met, he slightly curled his lips, and said nonchalantly, it's time to sleep. My face involuntarily turned red, but just remembering my mother's words felt like being doused with a bucket of cold water from head to toe. I glanced at his long, slender legs resting on his wheelchair, cautiously asked, do you need me to carry you to bed? After 2 seconds of silence, I licked my lips and added, I'm very strong, I can carry you. Fo Lang, sitting in the wheelchair, loosened 2 buttons of his shirt and smiled indifferently. Then I'll trouble you. I stepped forward, turned my back, and squatted down in front of him. 2 seconds later, Fo Lang leaned forward, placing his hands on my shoulders. His arms were long and relaxed, draping across my neck, carrying a strangely pleasant scent like mountain wind. At first, I only intended to show a little goodwill to the sponsor, but when he actually leaned on my shoulder, the close distance made my face flush. He had taken off his suit jacket, leaving only a white shirt. I had changed out of my wedding dress, wearing only a relatively simple long dress for serving drinks. The moment I carried him, I could even clearly feel his body heat transferring to me. Thinking of this, my heart began to race. My legs stumbled, and I stepped on the hem of the long dress again. I was carrying him, and we both fell to the ground. I lay face down on the ground, not daring to move. I felt I wasn't the type of female lead who would mess up. Living for over 20 years, I considered myself clever and smart. But I don't know why today I feel like I'm under some kind of spell. This is the second time I've fallen flat on my face. Falling is one thing, but I even dragged the financier down with me. After a long time without seeing him move, I started to panic a little. He didn't faint, did he? I was about to look up when his low, slightly hoarse voice rang out. Come here. I immediately sat up and quietly walked over to squat down beside him. I was about to explain, still gathering my words in my head when suddenly someone yanked my wrist hard. Fo Lang grabbed my hand and gently pulled, causing me to fall straight into his arms. The floor was icy cold, and he lay there on his back, one hand gripping my wrist, looking down at me as I lay on top of him.
This story is brought to you by Brainy Vibe.
Being this close, I could see just how handsome he was, a deadly kind of beauty. T-Jinian, you're staring at me, he said through clenched teeth. Help me back to the wheelchair, I can get into bed by myself. Okay, fine. Fo Lang's gaze was so intense that I didn't dare look him in the eye. I quickly avoided his gaze and lowered my head to help him up. But I had fallen a bit far, and the wheelchair was still lying a few steps away. Thinking about how the young master Fo couldn't stand on his own, I had no choice but to help him sit down on the floor for now. Just sit here for a moment, let me go get the wheelchair. Fo Lang didn't say anything, but his gaze darkened a bit. I guess you might regret it, even if it's just buying a vase, you should at least choose one with some brains. Wanting to make up for my mistake, I hurriedly rushed to push the wheelchair closer. I bent down to try to help him up again, but Fo Lang didn't move at all. What's wrong? Are you sulking? I looked down and saw him sigh, his voice low and hoarse. Full of helplessness. You're sitting on my legs. I'm sorry. This time I was determined to make up for it, gathering all my strength to lift him, Princess Kyo, into the wheelchair. But it seemed like the young master Fo wasn't happy at all. He gritted his teeth, his ears flushed, his lips pressed tightly as if enduring something terrible, and said almost through clenched teeth, T-Jinian, I told you to help me, not to carry me. Truly hard to please. I replied obediently and pushed the wheelchair to the side of the bed, just about to see how he would get into bed. But at that moment, a voice rang out, seemingly embarrassed. Turning my back, I obediently turned around, only to see a small mirror on the opposite table, and through that mirror, I clearly saw Fo Lang sitting in the wheelchair, both hands propped up on the edge of the bed. Thud. He fell down. The atmosphere was a bit awkward. I was currently facing away from him, and I couldn't turn back, but if I didn't turn, that would be even worse. As I hesitated, a voice behind me sounded a bit annoyed, as if he was angry but couldn't vent it. What are you still standing there for? Ah. I quickly turned back. Fo Lang was sitting on the ground, his legs looking really weak, his lips pressed tightly, and his ears were bright red. Perhaps after 2 faceplants, the young master Fo's pride had taken quite a hit. I bent down, wrapping his arm around my shoulder to help him stand up, while supporting him and sincerely comforting, Mr. Fo, don't take it too hard. If it were me who was paralyzed, I probably wouldn't even be able to wipe myself after going to the bathroom. What to say about it? Before I could finish my sentence, Fo Lang's hand resting on my shoulder tightened. Shut your mouth. Yes. So I obediently helped him up to the bed. Then immediately received a cold command, from now on when going out with me, only smile, do not speak. Yes, after all, he was the one paying, and I just needed to do my job. If he didn't let me talk, then I could just drink water through my nose. On the wedding night, I initially planned to sleep on the ground to avoid trouble, but Fo Lang wouldn't allow it. He made me sleep beside him under the same blanket. Actually, I don't oppose it, but I still have to act a little shy. It's not really okay for Laini to be blushing like that. Then he suddenly handed me a bank card. I was silent for a few seconds. It was again 100 yuan. 200,000 N confirmed the order. Dear husband. I immediately snatched the card, grinning and stuffing it into my pocket. That night was very peaceful, just a bit cold. This damn guy somehow rolled all the blankets towards him in the middle of the night. I was shivering with cold, so I had to sneak closer to him to share half the blanket. I only vaguely remembered that his body was very warm, as if I were hugging a heater in my arms. The next morning, when I woke up, Fo Lang was already sitting in the wheelchair. I don't know when he climbed up by himself. The wheelchair was placed right next to the bed. He was holding a book, bowing his head and reading very intently. The gentle morning sunlight streamed through the window, covering his eyelashes and the corners of his eyes with a thin layer of golden light. That scene was really beautiful. I was lost in thought admiring the handsome guy when he suddenly turned his head to go downstairs for breakfast. I quickly nodded, then noticed the dark circles under his eyes. Did you not sleep well last night? Clearly, he was sleeping soundly while hugging the blanket. Fo Lang put the book down and turned the wheelchair to leave the room. I quickly got out of bed to wash my face. When I passed by the book he had just read, I couldn't help but stop. Is it true that the rich kids have such a rich childlike spirit? After finishing breakfast, Fo Lang went outside. Before leaving, he reminded me that no matter where I planned to go today, I had to be ready by 7 p.m. at home because he would take me to the Fo family's family party tonight. I obediently nodded. The Fo family's family party really can't be taken lightly. Moreover, at my wedding party with Fo Lang yesterday, the upper class and business tycoons all came to congratulate, but no one from the Fo family showed up. Looking at Fo Lang, it seems he didn't care either. I didn't go to work and staying in the empty villa was boring, so I called a taxi to go out for a stroll. His garage, though full of luxury cars covered in dust, had no driver left, while I didn't even have a driver's license to get there. Taking the bank card, I caught a cab outside to the most luxurious shopping mall in the city. The mall was crowded, but most people were just like me, looking around without buying anything. After all, everything here costs tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands. Ordinary people could only sigh. I walked around, my hands still empty, but my stomach started to hurt badly. I suddenly remembered I had some paper in my pocket, so I turned around to look for a public restroom. But maybe because it was the weekend, the number of people was too large. The women's toilet had a long line, while the men's toilet was completely empty. My stomach was in unbearable pain, so I had to sneak into the men's toilet, lock the door, sit down, and just as I was pulling my pants up to flush, there were 2 knocks on the partition next to me, followed by a deep male voice. "Excuse me, could you please pass me a few sheets of paper?" The voice was both hoarse and masculine, sounding extremely nice. I hurriedly rummaged through my bag, pulled out a few remaining sheets of paper, and handed them through the gap in the partition without looking. But a few seconds later, it was pushed back from the other side. "Is it not okay to use this? Is there any paper left?" I dreamily bowed my head to take a look. "I'm done for." What was returned was the sanitary napkin I kept as a backup in my bag. My face immediately turned bright red, and I hurriedly pulled out some tissues to stuff back through the gap. "Sorry, I took the wrong one earlier." The other person paused for a few seconds before realizing, their voice tinged with curiosity, slightly raised. "Is it a girl?" At this moment, I suddenly remembered that I was still in the men's toilet. Not daring to say a word anymore, I immediately ran away in panic. At 7 p.m. when Fo Lang got home, I had finished changing into my formal attire and makeup, sitting elegantly on the sofa waiting for him. As soon as I saw his figure in the wheelchair appear, I immediately stood up, holding my dress, and quickly walked in front of him, not forgetting to show off, "Aren't I beautiful?" I admit that sometimes I am a bit dreamy and tend to misspeak, but when it comes to looking good, I have never failed. From high-end parties to bars, I have never chosen the wrong outfit. Fo Lang's gaze lingered on me for about 6 or 7 seconds, but then it drifted away as if nothing happened, his tone indifferent, "It's okay, it's okay." Looking at the way his eyes avoided mine, it was clear he didn't dare to look any longer, but after all, he was the main sponsor, so I wasn't foolish enough to turn against him. So I eagerly volunteered to take on the role of assistant, pushing the wheelchair to take him outside. Out the door and into the car. From Fo Lang's villa to the Fo family home isn't far, just about a 20-minute drive. On the way, he remained silent, but I noticed his expression growing colder. It seems the rumors are true, the relationship between Fo Lang and the Fo family really has issues. Is this the Fo family? I stood in front of the gate, gently holding back. It wasn't a villa but a manor, and from a distance, I couldn't even see the end. After gazing for a few seconds, I withdrew my gaze, turned around, and pushed the wheelchair for Fo Lang. With the young master leading the way, we went straight without being stopped by anyone. When I almost lost my way, the butler appeared, guiding us to a building and opening the door to invite us in. I pushed Fo Lang inside. The banquet hall was very spacious, with dozens of people standing inside chatting. As soon as we stepped through the door, almost all the eyes in the room turned to us simultaneously. I smiled, calmly pushed the wheelchair, and headed straight for the central area of the hall. There was a couple standing there. The man wore a perfectly tailored suit, standing tall with a steady demeanor. The woman beside him leaned on his arm, her red dress hugging her figure, clearly indicating that these two were the main figures of the faux family. Sure enough, as we approached, Faux Lang paused for 2 seconds and called out in a deep voice, "Brother, I wasn't wrong, that person is Faux Kin, the heir of the faux family." Faux Kin nodded slightly, his gaze sweeping over Faux Lang before finally landing on me. That look was sharp, as if it could pierce through someone, completely different from Faux Lang's lazy coldness. In that gaze, there was possession and sharpness that made others not dare to look directly. I tried to hide my unease and called out after Faux Lang, "Hello." But when he heard my voice, Faux Kin raised an eyebrow slightly, and in the depths of his quiet eyes like an ancient well, a flicker of surprise appeared. In the next moment, his gaze left my face and gently fell on my wrist. I was a bit confused, so I lowered my head to look. On my right hand, I wore a silver bracelet. I had always worn it before. Since I thought it matched today's outfit, I didn't take it off. While I was still lost in thought, I looked up and saw that Faux Kin had already shifted his gaze away at some point. That look just now was probably just my imagination. This man gives off an overwhelming sense of pressure. Maybe he didn't look for long, just casually exchanged a few words with Faux Lang before turning and leaving. Faux Lang also seemed to dislike socializing. He told me to push him to a quiet corner, without mingling or starting a conversation, just sitting there silently. His gaze drifted over each person, yet he didn't utter a word. After sitting for a while, I started to feel a bit suffocated, so I said to him, "I'm going to the restroom for a moment." Faux Lang nodded without saying anything. Once I reached the hallway and saw no one around, I pulled a cigarette out of my crossbody bag. Saying I was going to the restroom was just an excuse. I was feeling too stifled and couldn't take it anymore. I had to go relieve some pressure. Just as I took a puff, I heard footsteps behind me. I hurriedly put out the cigarette when a familiar voice suddenly rang out behind me. "No need to put it out, just give me one." I hid the hand holding the cigarette behind my back and turned around. It was Faux Kin who had come. He walked over, stopping about 2 steps away from me, extending his hand with his palm up, signaling me to give him a cigarette. I hesitated for a moment. My cigarettes were cheap and quite strong in flavor. "It's fine." Faux Kin slightly curled his lips, as if smiling, saying, "Just what I wanted." With that, I had no choice but to open my bag and take out another cigarette to give to him. He took the cigarette and lighter, lighting it up. As the smoke wafted out, he tilted his head to look at me. "Don't you recognize me?" "Huh?" I was a bit confused, awkwardly laughing. I realized then that he was Faux Lang's older brother. "No." Faux Kin took another drag from the cigarette. His profile was truly handsome. "This afternoon, thanks for the note." "It's you." I blurted out, surprised and not knowing how to react. Before I could digest the information, a figure in a wheelchair suddenly appeared from around the corner of the hallway. Faux Lang pushed the wheelchair himself, his lazy gaze flicking over me, his tone indifferent. "What do you mean it's him?" I was silent, not knowing how to respond. In contrast, Faux Kin remained calm, holding the cigarette, his expression serene, his gaze indifferent. Under Faux Lang's intense stare, he leisurely brought the cigarette to his lips for another drag, clearly not intending to explain anything. I felt a bit flustered. What should I say now? Should I say that this afternoon I wandered around a high-end shopping mall, accidentally entered the men's restroom, and then mistakenly handed a sanitary pad to his husband? Hearing that would be no different from slapping myself in the face. Just as I was unsure how to explain, Faux Lang's voice rang out again. "Let's go." With that, he quietly turned the wheelchair and left. I hurriedly followed, but just as I passed by Faux Kin, he suddenly spoke up. "The cigarettes are quite good, thank you." This strange dialogue ended in an awkward atmosphere. I rushed to catch up, actively pushing the wheelchair for Faux Lang. I'm not stupid, I know who my main sponsor is. Even though his brother is indeed much richer. Perhaps because the Faux family has too many members, this family banquet looked like an upper-class party no matter how you viewed it. I stood behind Fo Lang, my hands on the wheelchair handles, maintaining a polite smile, nodding to greet each person passing by. But with so many coming and going, no one stopped to greet Fo Lang even once. It seems he not only lost his inheritance rights but his status in the family is also pitifully low. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for him, but Fo Lang didn't seem to care at all. He even appeared to enjoy himself. He raised his hand casually to grab a piece of cake from a nearby table. With the cake in his left hand, he beckoned me with his right. "Come here." As I obediently leaned closer, a hand gently pinched my cheek. That exquisite piece of cake was shoved straight into my mouth. A light sweet aroma spread in my mouth. Lang brushed his hands, casually sweeping off the crumbs stuck to his fingers. "Are you being good?" "Delicious." He nodded. "Later, we'll take some home." I held on to the person. Suddenly, a scene from my childhood of eating at a village party flashed in my mind. I could see the adults holding plastic bags, gathering roasted chickens to take home. Realizing something, I silently tightened my grip on the wheelchair armrest. It seems the position of the second young master in the family is indeed very difficult. I had read countless stories about domineering CEOs, where when the female lead enjoyed a meal, the young masters would always wave their hands, asking the chef to prepare separate portions for her. But my young master just waved his hand, took some home, and the family party passed by peacefully, only calm on the side of Fo Lang, while on the side of Fo Doi Kin, there were many people crowding around, very lively. I couldn't help but glance a few times, but it was clear that those people were thick-skinned and came close on their own. Fo Doi Kin just stood there alone, with a cold expression, hardly speaking to anyone except for his girlfriend beside him. Indeed, even at a family party, there was a division of class. I felt a bit bored, and was about to turn to chat with Fo Lang when I lowered my head and caught his gaze also looking towards the crowd. He wasn't looking at Fo Doi Kin but at the woman standing next to him. If I guessed correctly, that was Fo Doi Kin's future fiancée. In the days I got to know Fo Lang, his gaze was always indifferent, as if nothing in the world was worth his concern. I often thought to myself, that face was indeed the epitome of handsome but jaded. However, the look he gave that woman was excessively warm. It seems that Fo Lang's feelings for his future sister-in-law are definitely not simple. As soon as he withdrew his gaze, I immediately turned to another direction. As a standard vase, I understood better than anyone that one should not guess the thoughts of the sponsor. Guessing too much can easily lead to losing one's job. I originally thought that as long as I obediently sat in a quiet corner with Fo Lang and waited for the party to end, that would be enough. I didn't expect trouble to find me. The party had only gone halfway when a woman in a black dress approached us. She looked about 25 or 26 years old, and without needing to speak, just by looking at her face, I knew she was not someone easy to deal with. She was indeed beautiful but exuded a sour and unpleasant vibe. Sure enough, she stopped in front of Fo Lang, her gaze sweeping over his face, her voice both biting and fake. "Fo Lang, how is your leg doing? I heard the elder brother say you might never stand up again. But don't be discouraged, who knows if there really are miracles in this world." It sounded no different from the gossiping neighbor sitting at the corner. And Fo Lang's reaction? There was no reaction at all. He didn't even bother to glance at her, letting her stand there rambling on to him. Those words were like barking dogs in his ears, completely not worth his concern. But she clearly had no intention of stopping. She casually took 2 glasses of wine from a tray nearby, handing one glass towards Fo Lang. My uncle's wedding was too busy for me to attend. "Come on, let's have a late toast." Fo Lang didn't accept it. Her arm holding the wine glass hung in the air, clearly showing her embarrassment. After pausing for 2 seconds, she turned her gaze to me. The rejected wine glass was immediately placed in front of me. I glanced at Fo Lang. Perhaps realizing my gaze, he spoke up in a nonchalant tone without any hesitation. Fo Yuyan, my grandfather's adopted granddaughter, had once secretly confessed her feelings to me. I felt awkward using the term her. Can this really be said openly in broad daylight like this? Looking at Fo Lang's expression, it was clear he must have rejected her outright at that moment. Why was Fo Yuyan so sarcastic just now? The more love, the deeper the hatred. The wine glass had been held for too long, and the people around began to notice. Seeing that Fo Lang didn't stop me, I reached out to take it. After all, even if she was just an adopted child, she still bore the title of Miss Fo. Miss, you invited me for a drink, and I'm just a vase, how could I dare not drink? But just as I was about to touch the wine glass, Fo Yuyan suddenly let go. Before I could react, the wine glass fell straight onto Fo Lang. The red wine spilled, soaking his black suit. The white shirt underneath was also stained with dark red streaks, looking quite messy. The glass rolled on him for a while before falling to the ground. Crash! The sound of breaking glass rang out sharply. Shards flew everywhere, and a piece cut into my instep, causing a sharp pain. Fo Yuyan's expression immediately changed. She raised an eyebrow, her tone shifting. I invited you for a drink out of respect for Fo Lang. If you don't want to drink, fine, but what do you mean by smashing the glass? Attracting the attention of everyone around, she immediately escalated the situation. If you are dissatisfied that no one from the Fo family attended the wedding, just say it directly. But this is a family gathering of the Fo family, smashing the glass in front of everyone is a challenge to the Fo family, isn't it? I frowned slightly, feeling like a huge hat had just been placed on my head. I was about to speak up in rebuttal, but fearing it would affect Fo Lang, I first glanced at him. That person remained calm as usual, but when my gaze met his, he slightly raised an eyebrow. I wasn't sure if I understood correctly, but 4 words echoed in my head, making me feel uncomfortable. I wasn't the type to endure, so I really spoke back, saying I didn't need her to label me as opposing the Fo family. This was my first time stepping into this place, and I had been very well behaved from start to finish, with no reason to cause trouble. What just happened was indeed an accident, but if she insisted on finding a reason, then let's say it was because I found her annoying. After saying that, I pretended to suddenly remember something, deliberately raising my voice so the whole banquet hall could hear. But does Miss Fo think I dislike her because she once confessed to my husband? As soon as I finished speaking, I pretended to be surprised and covered my mouth with my hand. Oh no, can this really be said? Fo Yuyan's face turned from purple to pale white. What nonsense are you talking about? What nonsense are you talking about? Fo Lang is my brother, how could I confess my feelings to him? Besides, he is just a cripple, what is there to like about him? She was so angry that her true self was completely revealed. It seems that the fact she once secretly confessed to Fo Lang is something she truly cannot bring to light. After all, both of them are technically children of the Fo family. I shrugged, turned to look at Fo Lang, and pretended to be wronged. Fo Lang, are you talking nonsense? He didn't look at me, but the corners of his lips clearly curled up as if he was smiling. Fortunately, Fo Lang cooperated perfectly. His voice was flat and echoed, definitely not lacking. Just those 2 words were enough to establish a position. Then he turned to me, clearly speaking to me, but his voice echoed throughout the banquet hall. The video of her confessing to him is still saved on the device. If you want to see it, I'll show it to you tonight. I looked at Fo Yuyan's expression and smiled sweetly. Yes, I'm also very curious, I wonder what it would look like when Miss Fo confessed to her brother. No wonder she is someone who studied abroad, her mindset is indeed quite open. Fo Yuyan's face lost all color, in the end, she couldn't take it anymore. We were only a step or 2 apart when she suddenly rushed over and slapped me. Before that hand could land, it was stopped mid-air, 1 high, 1 low, 2 hands firmly held Fo Yuyan's wrist. After a few seconds of silence, the sound of gasping filled the room. 1 hand belonged to Fo Lang. He sat in a wheelchair, his arm slightly raised to block the blow, but it was the other hand that made everyone's eyes widen. Fo Doi Kin, the man who had been cold and almost didn't bother to respond to anyone since the beginning. He was the one holding Fo Yuyan's wrist, his cold voice rang out. What are you doing? Just those 5 icy words were enough to silence Fo Yuyan. The person who just dared to boast and mock Fo Lang now acted like a meek cat, not daring to breathe loudly. Fo Yuyan didn't say anything more. In fact, for his status, just those 5 words were more than enough. His gaze swept past Fo Yuyan and lingered briefly on my face before he turned and left. At this moment, the woman in the red dress who had been standing beside him actively walked towards me. Unlike Fo Yuyan's fierce demeanor, she politely nodded to Fo Lang and smiled at me. "Hello, I am Fo Yuyan's fiancé, my name is Antom." I hurriedly reached out to shake hands. Antom sounds gentle and elegant, but the person in front of me was not just that, she was also stunningly beautiful. Well-groomed, with a graceful figure, her gentle smile almost made me forget that I was a woman. Seductive is the right word to describe someone like her. It's not hard to understand why she could stand next to Fo Yuyan. After a few simple exchanges, Antom also left. But I noticed that throughout, Fo Lang's gaze remained fixed on her, not leaving for even a second. I didn't expect this person to be the type who silently pines away. After Antom left, Fo Lang still didn't say a word, he just started sending me to get drinks. Glass after glass, he frowned, his expression heavy, clearly troubled inside. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer and gently reminded him, "Drinking too much is really bad for your health, you should drink less." But Fo Lang just glanced at me, rummaged through his jacket pocket for a few seconds, and pulled out a bank card to hand directly to me. "Shut up." I stared at the card for 2 seconds, and before I could even ask how much was on it, he casually said, 50,000, no password needed. "Yes, sir." I immediately fell silent, obediently accepted the card, looked it over, and sighed quietly to myself. Is this person a card-selling duplicate? He can always pull one out, and the amount is different each time. After waiting around, the family party finally came to an end. I breathed a sigh of relief and pushed Fo Lang out of the Fo family house. Once in the car, he took off his suit jacket, gently pressed his fingers on his temples, and leaned back against the seat with his eyes closed. Is it a family gathering? I immediately leaned towards him, but just as the car took a sharp turn, I lost my balance and fell straight into Fo Lang's lap. How strange. The moment I bumped into him, I instinctively reached out to brace myself but ended up pressing my hand right against his abs. It felt solid, with clearly defined muscles. I was slightly taken aback. How did this person, who was paralyzed and in a wheelchair all day, manage to have such abs? Did he do ab workouts in his dreams? While I was lost in thought, a familiar voice rang out above me. Have you touched enough? I snapped back to reality, quickly retracted my hand, sat up straight, and forced a smile. Just now, the car turned sharply, and I couldn't hold on. Fo Lang replied coldly, then opened his eyes and looked towards the front seat, where the driver was braking hard. The driver hurriedly thanked him, smiling so much that the corners of his mouth nearly touched his ears. Was Tang Luong trying to set up a sharp turn so I would fall into your lap? That was thoughtful of him. After that transparent exchange, I quietly asked, what did you call me for earlier? Fo Lang tilted his head to look at me and pulled out a small exquisite bag from somewhere, handing it to me. Let me open it. Inside were several pieces of pastries that had been carefully wrapped, the same ones from the party earlier. So you still remember that I like to eat? I froze for a few seconds before raising my hand to accept it. The sweets are made by the Fo family's private chef. The almond flavor is lightly sweet without being overpowering, and they taste really good. Unable to resist, I broke off a piece and held it up to Fo Lang's mouth. You should try it too. Fo Lang glanced down briefly, and out of respect for me, he slightly opened his mouth to take a bite. The second night sharing a bed. Before that, his personal assistant had helped him bathe. When he stepped out of the bathroom, he had changed into a black high-end pajama set, soft yet cool. What was strange was that the outfit he was wearing matched mine. The room was only lit by a dim nightlight. I hurried over to push his wheelchair, forgetting to put on my slippers. This story is brought to you by Brainy Vibe. Barefoot on the wooden floor, it felt cool but not cold, just a bit embarrassing. After all, Fo Lang and I were just contract spouses, and wearing matching pajamas felt too awkward. As I pushed the wheelchair closer to the bed, he frowned and kept urging me to hurry up. Only after I helped him onto the bed did he look down at my feet on the floor and coldly say, "The floor is cold." So I obediently climbed onto the bed. Although his legs were disabled and his personality was quite cold, it couldn't be denied that he still knew how to care for others. That night, I suddenly remembered the feeling of falling into his lap earlier. That embrace was both warm and solid. Thinking about it, I couldn't sleep anymore. Fo Lang beside me was sleeping soundly, probably due to the alcohol. His sleep was so heavy that he even talked in his sleep. "TG, actually that card has no money on it." After speaking, he continued to sleep as if nothing had happened. I still held the card he gave me last night in my hand, unable to sleep all night. The next morning, I woke up to an empty space beside me. I thought I had overslept until noon, but when I pulled the curtain aside, the sky outside was still gloomy and gray. Looking at the wall clock, it was just past 5 a.m. I yawned, slipped on my sandals to go to the bathroom, planning to get back to bed for more sleep, but then I worried about where Fo Lang might have gone so early in the morning with his condition. Feeling anxious, I put on a robe, stepped out of the room, and the hallway still had the night light on, casting a soft, dim glow. I walked to the top of the stairs and leaned down to look at the empty living room on the first floor. I thought he must have had something to do outside early. Just as I was about to turn back, I suddenly heard Fo Lang's voice, deep and low, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I glanced around. It seemed the voice was coming from a room further down the first floor hallway. I knew I shouldn't be curious, let alone eavesdrop. But for some reason, my feet moved automatically toward that direction. At the door of the room, I held my breath, pressed myself against one side, and peeked through the slightly ajar door. And the scene inside left me stunned in disbelief. The cold, indifferent man I had known for the past few days seemed to have transformed into someone completely different. He wore loose black silk pajamas, leaning sideways on the chair, exuding an aura even stronger than Fo Lang. In a moment, he spoke clearly to me. His voice was steady, holding a cigarette, his posture relaxed as if he were casually chatting. I shifted my gaze to the side and noticed that besides a few bodyguards in black standing around, there was also a man kneeling on the floor in front of him. The man had his back to me, so I couldn't see his face clearly. After Fo Lang finished speaking, the other man clearly trembled slightly but still didn't say anything. Fo Lang wasn't in a hurry, just holding the cigarette and looking at him, his gaze piercing through the other person. From where I stood, I had the perfect angle to see his face clearly. Even though we had been together for a few days, it was only now that I realized the pressure Fo Lang exuded was so heavy. I was still in shock when he suddenly raised his voice as if scolding the other man to confess honestly. I was startled, my hand trembled slightly, and I accidentally pushed the door open a bit more. The door creaked as it opened. Fo Lang was leaning on the chair, turning his head back, and our eyes met. The atmosphere was both awkward and suffocating, with a hint of embarrassment. I gathered all my courage to look at Fo Lang. When I woke up and didn't see him, I felt a bit worried, so I came down to check. As long as he's okay, that's good. I'll head back to my room now. After saying that, I turned to leave quickly. "Stop." Fo Lang's voice called out. His tone was no longer the lazy, relaxed style from before. I took a deep breath, turned back, and saw Fo Lang staring intently at my feet, his brows furrowed. I followed his gaze and realized I was barefoot on the floor. Oh right, I had left my sandals at the top of the stairs while eavesdropping, and now I had forgotten to put them on while walking down. Earlier, I was too anxious and excited about the situation to even feel cold. Fo Lang signaled to an assistant beside him, and the person immediately understood, pushing a wheelchair over for him to sit in. Fo Lang rolled the wheelchair in front of me, his gaze still icy, making me feel a bit panicked. I intended to call out but found it inappropriate as soon as I started. Calling him young master felt too distant. Calling Fo Lang, we aren't that close yet. I was still hesitating when Fo Lang acted first. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, applying a bit of force, and I fell right into his lap. Fo Lang was sitting in a wheelchair, while I was on his lap, my heart racing, not out of embarrassment but out of worry. His leg was already injured. I wondered if sitting like this would make it worse. I quickly pushed my hands against the armrests of the wheelchair, intending to stand up. Who would have thought my hand accidentally pressed the wrong button? The wheelchair began to slowly roll towards the wall. Fortunately, Fo Lang stopped it in time, frowning and pushing me back down. "Sit still," his cold voice frightened me, and I obediently stayed still. So Fo Lang held me in his arms, personally controlling the wheelchair, waiting for me to return to the room upstairs. The villa had an elevator, so going up and down was not inconvenient. So I was carried the whole way back to the room. Fearing I might hurt him, I sat still like a statue, not daring to move an inch. By the time the wheelchair stopped next to the bed, my face was so hot I could have fried an egg on it. If it weren't so embarrassing right now, I really wanted to call my mother and tell her never to believe those ridiculous rumors out there again. Who said Fo Lang was paralyzed and couldn't do anything? The wheelchair stopped by the bed, and I immediately jumped down, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Let me help you up." My face was flushed, and I quietly asked. Fo Lang rubbed his temples. "No need, I'll sit for a while." Saying that, his tone was casual. It was still early. "You can sleep a little longer." Yes, after all, I just witnessed him dealing with something shady. I wouldn't dare to disobey him now. So I obediently crawled under the blanket. Indeed, it was still early. I hadn't been lying down long when sleepiness hit me. In a daze, I felt someone get into bed next to me. Instinctively, I wrapped my arms around his waist and threw my legs over him. At home, I'm used to hugging a large stuffed bear to sleep, always in that position, limbs everywhere, clinging tightly. In my sleepy haze, it seemed the person I was hugging stiffened up. When I woke up, the sun was already shining on my backside. I opened my eyes and unconsciously faced a pair of deep, dark eyes. The gaze lowered to reveal Fo Lang. He was still wearing the black silk pajamas from last night, but for some reason, the top two buttons had come undone, revealing his collarbone clearly. I tried to force myself to look away, avoiding his gaze, but then I realized the current hugging position was truly something I couldn't look at closely. My arms were still tightly wrapped around his waist, my legs draped over his, my whole body clinging to him like an octopus. Meeting that gaze again, I panicked and immediately let go. "I'm sorry, I'm used to it." But that explanation seemed to backfire. The man who had been calm all this time now frowned, his voice turning cold. "Used to hugging who?" I was stunned for a few seconds, then honestly replied, "A stuffed bear that's as tall as me." Vice Lang was silent for 2 seconds, the corners of his mouth slightly lifted, as if he was smiling. "Yes, later tell the assistant to buy me a new one." Vice Lang said what he could do. We had just eaten half of our breakfast when your assistant appeared with 2 bodyguards. 3 men, each pulling along 2 giant stuffed bears, each a different color. Vice Lang glanced over, his voice lazy. "Which one do you like to put on the bed?" I quickly swallowed the bite of cake in my mouth. "Then take the gray one." Actually, I didn't dare to say the second half of that sentence. "The gray one looks a lot like Vice Lang. It must be very warm and easy to sleep with." Just as breakfast was almost finished, Vice Lang's phone on the table suddenly rang. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. I was curious and secretly glanced at the screen flashing the 3 words "Fo Kin." Vice Lang didn't hurry to answer the phone. Only when it was about to stop ringing did he slowly wipe his hands and press the answer button. Since he wasn't holding the phone, he turned on the speaker. And just a few seconds later, the first sentence from the other end went straight to the point without any greetings or beating around the bush. Fo Kin got straight to the issue. "We need an interpreter on our side, planning to borrow someone from you. I heard that the maid T used to study German in college. Can I borrow her for a day?" I almost spat out my sip of soy milk. Borrowing me for a day didn't sound very reasonable. A big corporation like the Fo family can't possibly find a temporary interpreter? I felt that saying they were short-staffed was just an excuse. I swallowed the sip of milk, turned to look at Vicelang. Although we are a contract couple, I still carry the title of the second young mistress of the faux family. Being borrowed by my brother-in-law for interpretation sounds a bit unreasonable. Yet Vicelang was silent for 2 seconds, then neatly responded. After speaking, he hung up without asking where to go. What time do we need to prepare for? Not a single question was asked. 2 minutes later, his phone vibrated. At that moment, Vicelang was leisurely cutting a medium-rare steak, still seeing a bit of red juice oozing out as he cut. Eating like this so early in the morning, his performance is still top-notch, huh? After finishing his meal, he finally picked up the phone. I sneaked a glance. It seemed to be a message from Fovoikin sending the time and place I needed to go. After breakfast, Vicelang personally took me to the company. I was a bit surprised. I heard that even before he was paralyzed, Vicelang was the kind of playboy who never set foot in the company, spending all day drowning in alcohol, parties, and spending money without blinking. I thought he would call the driver to take me. On the way, Vicelang was still as quiet as ever. Only when we were about to get out of the car did he tilt his head to look at me and ask, "There might be some technical terms involved, right? Are you sure you can handle it?" I really wanted to show a bit of confidence in front of Kim Zhu, but thinking about the faux family's business involving hundreds of millions, I didn't dare to joke and had to shake my head, not sure. I thought he would immediately call someone else to replace me. But Vicelang just closed his eyes and leaned back, looking indifferent. Yes. As soon as I entered the meeting room, Vicelang and I ran into Vice Time Jing and the foreign partner. I hurriedly stood up and politely greeted them. Everything that followed went surprisingly smoothly. The one ensuring everything went well wasn't me, but that person who is still rumored to be a spoiled rich kid with no education. When Vicelang was in college, I struggled in every subject, and my German was just passable. After graduation, I hardly used it, and now being able to communicate at a basic level is already a significant improvement. But when specialized terms from their industry came up, I started to choke. Every time that happened, Vicelang calmly spoke up at the right moment. He still maintained a nonchalant expression, his tone indifferent, but his pronunciation was extremely accurate. By the second half of the meeting, the partners almost ignored me and Vice Time Jing, shifting to direct communication with Vicelang. Thus, the negotiation ended smoothly, and the partners even decided to sign the contract on the spot. The project was worth hundreds of millions, and Vicelang only needed a few gentle words to seal the deal. From where I was sitting, I could clearly see his profile. That man, even sitting in a wheelchair, sat up straight, with a calm demeanor and a noble, cold appearance that made others unable to underestimate him. When I first met him, I thought he was very simple, disabled, helpless, and had a seemingly easygoing personality. But the more I interacted with him, the more I realized he was far from simple. If Vice Time Jing was the sharp, cold type that made people wary, then Vicelang was the type that hid deep within a layer of mist. The deeper you dug, the more profound and unpredictable he became. A man like that cannot be judged by appearances. After signing the contract, Vice Time Jing wanted to invite the partners to dinner, but they politely declined. We walked out of the meeting room together, just in time to meet Aunt Tam coming from the hallway. In her hand was an exquisitely crafted thermos. I walked behind them, secretly observing, and just by looking, I knew the thermos contained soup that she had cooked herself. It turned out that the fiancé of a wealthy man would also cook soup and bring it to the company like any other ordinary girlfriend. I was silently sighing when unexpectedly, Aunt Tam slipped, seemingly stepping on something. Vicelang was the one who caught her. He was sitting in a wheelchair but leaned forward as much as he could, almost falling to the ground. Yet just as Aunt Tam was about to fall, he managed to catch her. Meanwhile, the person standing next to Vice Time Jing, his legitimate fiancé, did not make any move to help. I stood still watching that scene. Vicelang's hand held tightly onto Aunt Tam's wrist, but then it seemed to burn him, and he immediately let go. In fact, none of this was related to me, but I couldn't understand why my chest suddenly felt uncomfortable. After seeing the partners off to the elevator, the representative smiled and turned to me. "Are you the fiancé of the vice president? You're really good, thank you for helping with the translation today." I held back and quickly reacted to the vice president the partner mentioned. It must be Vice Time Jing. Clearly, the other party had misunderstood. I intended to open my mouth to explain, but Vice Time Jing spoke up first. "Thank you. The elevator has arrived. I wish us a pleasant cooperation." He didn't explain at all, and moreover, he spoke in German. Throughout the meeting, Vice Time Jing hadn't spoken a word of German. I thought he didn't know anything. It turned out he was just acting. I was becoming more and more confused. What weighed on my mind even more was that Vice Lang was right there, listening and fully understanding everything the partners and his brother said, yet he didn't speak up at all. After seeing off the partners, Tam finally handed the thermos to Vice Time Jing, saying it contained ginseng chicken soup, which she had spent the entire morning cooking. "Thank you." Vice Time Jing replied indifferently, casually handing it to the assistant standing next to him. From the beginning to the end, he didn't open the lid of the soup even once to take a look. The contract was done, and Vice Time Jing suggested that all four of us go out to eat. Just as I guessed, Vice Lang nodded in agreement. These two brothers clearly have issues. They have been at odds for years but haven't completely severed ties. There's a newly opened upscale restaurant near the company, and Vice Time Jing's assistant immediately called to make a reservation. But this restaurant is too famous, even someone as wealthy as Vice Time Jing couldn't get a private room. So the four of us sat in a relatively quiet corner of the restaurant. The dishes came out a bit slowly, but the flavors were indeed worth the wait. I was completely convinced by the chef's skills and ate very seriously. But while eating the ribs, some sauce dripped onto my sleeve. I hurriedly grabbed a napkin to wipe it off, bent down, and accidentally glanced under the table to see Tam. She is Vice Time Jing's fiancée, who is also Vice Lang's future sister-in-law, and is considered his white moonlight. She was gently rubbing the hem of Vice Lang's pants with the toe of her high-heeled shoe. I froze for 2 seconds, then calmly averted my gaze, instinctively glancing at Vice Lang, who was focused on peeling shrimp, his expression serious as if he were solving a difficult math problem, seemingly oblivious to Tam's actions. Actually, I wanted to remind her that his leg is paralyzed, not to mention rubbing under the table, even poking a needle in there wouldn't elicit any response. I happened to eat a piece of drama melon, but I couldn't let it show, so I pretended to drink 2 sips of soup. As soon as I set my spoon down, I noticed several peeled shrimp neatly arranged on my plate. I looked up and saw Vice Lang had just peeled them. He had been so serious all this time, it turned out he was peeling shrimp for me. I glanced at him and couldn't help but look over at Tam across the table, feeling a bit touched. I softly thanked him, and just as I was about to eat, Vice Lang suddenly put down his chopsticks, sounding a bit impatient, and pushed me towards the restroom. I was taken aback for 2 seconds before realizing he was talking to me. I set the shrimp down and obediently replied, "Yes." Even though I didn't understand why, while his wheelchair was clearly self-driving, I pushed him to the men's restroom. Vice Lang went in by himself, and I stood waiting in the hallway. I paced back and forth in the hallway, feeling a bit restless. Just then, a voice suddenly came from behind, "Want to smoke?" I jumped and turned around to see Vice Time Jing. I didn't understand why I kept running into him near the restroom, truly a fateful WC encounter. He pulled a cigarette from his pocket, raised an eyebrow, and offered it to me. I hesitated for 2 seconds, then couldn't help but take it and light it. As I took a puff, a gentle question came from beside me. "Did you notice that Vice Lang likes my fiancé?" Cough cough cough, I choked on the smoke and coughed continuously. "Probably not, sir." I hurriedly denied it. "You're overthinking it. Vice Lang is already married, how could he develop feelings for his future sister-in-law? This is something that can't be said carelessly." Even though I had some doubts in my heart, I couldn't admit it. Startled, I raised my hand to take another puff. Unexpectedly, the cigarette was snatched away by Vice Time Jing. He took a puff and extinguished it immediately with his fingertip. Then he pushed me against the wall, his tall figure pressing close, his hot breath covering my face. He said, "T-Jinian, after all, the two of you are just contract spouses. How about we switch partners for a try? This is insane." As soon as those words echoed in my ears, my mind went blank, repeating those two words over and over. Either I'm crazy, or Vice Time Jing is crazy. Does he even know what he's saying? I swallowed hard, wanting to open my mouth but not able to say a word. Because in that brief moment, I suddenly remembered the scene I had just seen under the table. Tam's high heels gently brushed against Fo Lang's leg. So my feelings are not an illusion. Perhaps there really was something between them. I am the kind of person who, when I start to think, easily gets lost in a chaotic mess of speculation. While I was lost in thought, a low voice echoed from the hallway. It was Fo Lang's voice. I immediately shivered, my hand instinctively jerked back, pushing Fo Kin away a little. In front of the bathroom door, Fo Lang sat in a wheelchair, staring directly at the two of us, his brows tightly knitted, his gaze as cold as ice. I caught a glimpse of his hand resting on the armrest of the wheelchair, his fingers clenched so tightly that the veins were bulging. He was very angry. I hurried towards him, intending to explain, but before I could say anything, my wrist was pulled back. Fo Kin slightly pulled me back. This guy is really getting crazier by the minute, or maybe he is just too confident in himself. Ignoring my resistance, he held my shoulder, turned his head and smiled at Fo Lang. "Aren't you very fond of being teased by Tam? Then how about we switch places?" Fo Kin's grip tightened, my shoulder hurt to the point where I thought my bones might break. I stared at Fo Lang, shaking my head and whispering, "Fo Lang, I haven't finished speaking yet. You came over while still sitting in the wheelchair, but when you stopped in front of us, you were sitting." Fo Kin stood, yet in terms of presence, the seated person made the standing one seem somewhat inferior. Fo Lang looked straight into Fo Kin's eyes, and just 2 seconds later, he reached out and grabbed the collar of his opponent's shirt. Using just a little force, Fo Kin had to bend down. In that moment, the lofty air of the Fo family revealed a rare hint of struggle. Fo Kin held Fo Lang's collar tightly, his back straight, each word heavy as if it could only be uttered. "Don't send your fiancé to probe me anymore. The fact that my leg is crippled is true, no need for further verification." Moreover, he looked straight at his opponent, remained silent for 2 seconds, then let out a cold laugh. Then he let go, even raising his hand to smooth out the wrinkled collar of his opponent, each movement gentle yet forceful. "Don't pull any more of those meaningless probing tricks in the future. If I really wanted to fight for this air position, you might not be sitting here today." After saying that, Fo Lang turned his gaze away, pushed the wheelchair, and took me away from the hallway. I breathed a sigh of relief and hurried to follow him. As soon as we turned the corner, I heard Fo Kin's soft laughter behind us. "Fo Lang, you are indeed more interesting than I thought." I thought to myself, the Fo brothers are truly each uniquely troubled. Fo Kin had just been scolded by his younger brother while being held by the collar, yet not only was he not angry, but he also seemed to enjoy it. A family full of unusual people. Of course, after being caught by Fo Lang in an ambiguous position with Fo Kin, I indeed felt a bit guilty and didn't dare to speak, just quietly followed behind. Fo Lang said nothing and simply left the restaurant. I intended to step up and help him push the wheelchair, as a way to make amends. Unexpectedly, as soon as I got behind him, he suddenly accelerated, and the wheelchair zoomed ahead. I missed my chance to hold him for a few seconds, and I could only sigh inwardly, truly arrogant to the point of overshadowing others. So I continued to follow behind, not daring to say a word. When we reached the parking lot, the driver helped him into the car, and I was also preparing to climb in after him. The car door closed. Through the dark window, I could only vaguely see Fo Lang's silhouette inside. "Fo Lang," I called out softly by reflex, but just then the driver got into the car. The glossy black Rolls-Royce Phantom zipped past me in an instant, leaving me speechless. I stood there dumbfounded, watching the tail of the car disappear, unable to help but curse silently. What a petty person. not even giving someone a chance to explain. It seems I'll have to take a taxi home by myself again today. Of course, I've learned my lesson this time. There's absolutely no way I'm renting 3 cars to drive in parallel like last time. What a waste of money for nothing. I stood by the roadside waving for a taxi for about 5 minutes, but none appeared. Instead, the Rolls-Royce Phantom that had just left made a U-turn and stopped right in front of me. The window rolled down, revealing the cold face of Fo Lang. I couldn't guess what his mood was like. After a moment of silence, Fo Lang slowly turned his head to look at me. "Aren't you getting in?" "Get in, get in, get in." The boss had thrown down the ladder, so I immediately picked it up and climbed in without hesitation. However, after getting in the car, Lang still wore a cold expression, remaining silent from start to finish. The atmosphere in the car was so oppressive it made it hard to breathe. The driver in front also held his breath, not daring to say a word, fearing that one wrong comment would bring trouble upon himself. Actually, I wanted to try to ease the tension a bit, flatter him with a few words to create some harmony, but after sneaking glances at him a few times, I still didn't dare to speak. Amidst that dead silence, the car finally arrived at the villa. I breathed a sigh of relief, and before the driver could open the door, I jumped out myself, quickly helping Fo Lang into the wheelchair. Just as I was about to push him into the house, he pressed the accelerator and sped off ahead without a word, truly frustrating. Having been married for a few days, today was the first time I lay alone in the empty room. After returning to the villa, Fo Lang told me to go back to my room first, while he didn't know where to go. Still thinking about Fo Lang's feelings, I felt restless. After all, he is the boss. If he gets angry, the one who will suffer will definitely be me. Thinking that way, I decided to go downstairs for a round, but still couldn't find Fo Lang anywhere. He originally liked peace and didn't want anyone to appear in his living space, so this villa only had cleaners coming at fixed times. By nightfall, the vast villa was left with just me, feeling eerily empty. I wandered around and then fumbled my way back to my room, my slippers making a squeaky sound. Fo Lang still hadn't returned. Just then, my mother sent me a text. I lazily crawled under the blanket, reading the message and replying half-heartedly. Sleepiness began to creep in. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, the blanket covering my head was suddenly yanked away. I almost screamed. But when the moonlight from the window shone in, I quickly realized the face in front of me was Fo Lang. He held me down with both hands, the strong smell of alcohol and a hurried kiss followed. On my forehead, on the corner of my eyes, then stopping on my lips. One hand held my chin tightly, forcing me to tilt my head back, and the kiss intensified. I stared at him wide-eyed, not even having time to react. This kiss was so powerful, it felt like it wanted to steal all my thoughts away. "Tjia," he called my name, his voice low and husky. The hand that had once gripped my chin now caressed my face, every contour etched deeply in my heart. "At first, I intended to reject you, but why are you being so disobedient?" I really wanted to say, "I am obedient." It was my brother who deliberately set a trap, creating a shady scene for me to stumble upon. But before I could say anything, my lips were blocked by another kiss from him. Fo Lang didn't give me a chance to explain. He propped his hands on the bed and leaned down to look at me. The moonlight fell on his face, making his eyes even deeper like a galaxy. Tjinian. The alcohol in his system seemed to have faded, and his rationality gradually returned. His voice was low and husky as he gently asked, "Do you know why, out of so many people, I chose a vase to marry?" "So why did I choose you?" I shook my head. Actually, I don't know why such a good thing fell on me either. No need to sell my body, nor my soul, just get married and be a vase in the true sense that can pocket tens of millions of yuan. Such a bargain, there must be thousands of girls fighting for it, and I wouldn't even get a chance. Why me? Fo Lang was silent for a long time, and I began to lose patience. Pressing my hands against him, I gently asked, "Why?" Fo Lang's gaze swept over my cheek, eyelashes, and finally rested on my lips. He pursed his lips, his throat moved slightly, and the air immediately became sensual. I held my breath looking at him, my heart pounding in my chest, finally waiting for him to speak, but I was determined to say no. But just as I was about to move, the strap of my nightgown suddenly loosened and slipped down with the movement. Fo Lang's gaze followed. In that moment, his gaze was as hot as if it had a physical presence. I was startled, pushing him away and pulling the strap back up. Because I was too nervous, I stammered a bit. "It's late, go to bed early." Hearing this, Fo Lang laughed again. "Is that an invitation?" My face turned red, and before I could refute, he interrupted. "Tjinian, I had drunk alcohol, so what if I swallowed?" He reached out with one hand to unbutton two buttons, the collar opened to reveal a distinct collarbone, and his gaze began to darken, making it very hard to control. Although he said that, he still just smiled and didn't do anything more. About half a minute later, he turned to lie down next to me. Throughout the process, his legs were soft and limp, moving entirely thanks to the strength of his arms. I suddenly felt a pang in my heart, realizing that these legs truly had no feeling. I used to wonder if he was pretending to be lame to hide his role as a weak sheep. Fo Lang lay still for a moment without speaking. I thought he was about to fall asleep when suddenly a voice as light as the wind rang in my ear. "Do you want to make money? I'll give you a chance." But that warm voice was now hoarse from the alcohol. Want. I sat up, propping my hands on the bed eagerly asking what the opportunity was. He tilted his head to look at me, marriage registration. I was a bit stunned. Wasn't getting married just a formality before? Why do you want to legalize it now? I hesitated and asked softly, "Is there a time limit?" Fo Lang was silent for a few seconds. 3 years, 10 million. He seemed unsure as well, asking as if he were probing, while I immediately took his hand. Transaction successful. Fearing he would change his mind, I even set an alarm for early morning, preparing to register as soon as the Civil Affairs office opened. But after calming down, I couldn't help but curiously ask, "Why?" Fo Lang closed his eyes, his voice returning to its usual indifference. "Don't be curious about Kim Chu's matters. Fo Lang and I have completed the marriage registration. However, the fault lies in my naivety, trusting too easily in the financial capabilities of the second young master of the Fo family." After receiving the marriage registration book, Fo Lang handed me a piece of paper. I thought it was a book, but to my surprise, when I opened it, it was a debt note, black and white, clearly stating that Fo Lang owed 10 million yuan to a private lender, committing to repay it within 3 years. I held the debt note, silently cursing this handsome crippled guy. But there was no way, his face was so beautiful that even though I was very angry, I couldn't bring myself to say anything harsh. I stared at the debt note for a long time before quietly putting it away. While Fo Lang was sitting with his eyes closed in the car, I secretly took out my phone to take a picture of the debt note, then covered the name and went online to ask if such a debt note had legal validity. Before the lawyer could respond, Fo Lang spoke up. "Don't look anymore, I will definitely pay you back in 3 years." Then he opened his eyes and looked at me with a helpless expression. "We are registered now. Isn't the money in my account also yours?" My eyes lit up. "That's true." I immediately put my phone away and shyly asked for the bank account password. Fo Lang tossed me his wallet, which contained 4 or 5 cards. He rubbed his forehead and said flatly, "The password is your birthday, just changed." I unceremoniously accepted all the cards, even if it wasn't 10 million, being the second young master of the Fo family, his account should at least have a few million, right? Now that we're married, he still says that. Then I'll just consider it marital property. But Fo Lang really isn't a person. I couldn't help but make an excuse to ask him to drop me off at the nearby shopping mall, saying I wanted to go shopping. After he left, I immediately ran to the bank. The 5 cards combined didn't even add up to 1 million. I started to seriously doubt. Could it be that Fo Lang is an unacknowledged illegitimate child of the Fo family? But according to the standards of the Fo family, even an illegitimate child shouldn't be this poor. I looked at the account balance, tears welling up. At that moment, I received a call from Fo Lang. He said, his father, the old man of the Faux family, has returned and wants to meet me. My legs immediately went weak. Before marrying Faux Lang, I might not have heard of the two brothers of the Faux family, but the reputation of the old man of the Faux family was known to everyone. My father-in-law's real name is Faux Kin Quan, originally a famous writer, who later switched from literature to business. His first venture was a resounding success, and he continued to grow, becoming the most renowned businessman in the city. Now, although he is older, in his youth he was decisive and ruthless, famous for his coldness and cruelty. I once watched a short interview with the old man, just a few brief minutes, but even through the screen, his sharp gaze was enough to send chills down one's spine. At this moment, my mind was like a scanner, frantically searching for any information related to the old man of the Faux family. After a while of intense thinking, I nearly wanted to cry. "Can't you not go?" Opposite me, Faux Lang replied in a very relaxed tone. "Guess what? I guess it's impossible. You seem to want to soothe me. Don't be afraid. That old man is very gentle." Gentle? I listened and almost cried, but no matter how scared I was, I couldn't escape. I tried to regain my composure, went to buy a modest, neat dress at the nearby mall, and changed right there. As soon as I stepped out of the mall, I saw Faux Lang Dao's car waiting by the curb. Once in the car, I was so nervous that I kept twisting the hem of my dress, and I quietly asked, "Hey, is your grandfather's house far away? I've heard that he likes to live alone and rarely stays in the big villa of the Faux family that I've been to." Faux Lang replied in a nonchalant tone, "Not too far off." Hearing that, I thought it must be about a 20-minute drive. But just as he finished speaking, in less than 3 minutes, the car stopped. To be more precise, I had just gotten into the car at the mall entrance, and after a quick turn, we entered the nearby villa area. This villa area, although located in a bustling commercial center, is vast and completely separated from the outside. The space is extremely quiet, and the environment is top-notch. I had seen people brag online about how shockingly high the land prices are here. And before I could prepare myself mentally, we had arrived. I was so tense that I twisted the hem of my dress, took a few deep breaths, and then followed Faux Lang out of the car. I walked behind, obediently pushing the wheelchair for him. Although the truth is, they didn't need me to push. Entering through the grand gate, the yard only had a few trees and flowers, simple yet elegant. As we continued into the house, the spacious living room was still empty, and I breathed a sigh of relief. What if the old man wasn't home? Just as I was secretly happy, footsteps suddenly echoed from the kitchen. Just a few seconds later, an elderly man holding a cooking spatula appeared at the kitchen door. His hair was partially gray, but his eyes were still bright and sharp, and he wore a black apron around his waist. That face slowly matched the stern face I had seen in interviews years ago. It was him, Kin Quan. But the man who was once dubbed the king of hell in the business world now wore a radiant smile, his voice booming, "Faux Lang, Dad is making your favorite sweet and sour Westlake dish." As he spoke, he cheerfully walked over, even bringing the cooking spatula to Faux Lang's mouth as if coaxing a child, tasting the sauce to see if it was good. Faux Lang frowned and pushed the spatula away. At that moment, he unexpectedly grabbed my wrist, pulling me, the one standing there like a statue, towards him. My heart raced up to my throat. I opened my mouth to call him Dad, but immediately felt it was wrong, quickly changing my tone to a stiff, "Dad, help me." Who would have thought that the old man who was rumored to be a ruthless figure in the business world would be like this at home? Before I could even use the greetings I had prepared in my head, the old man from the Faux family held the spatula in one hand and grabbed my hand with the other, smiling broadly, "Good, very good." After saying that, he let go, walked to the tea table, took 2 boxes, and handed them to me, calling them meeting gifts. One of them was particularly large. I couldn't refuse and had to accept it in a panic. It was heavy enough to break my arm. This box must weigh several kilograms. The old man enthusiastically invited me to sit on the sofa and then turned back to the kitchen, saying he would make a few more of his signature dishes for the two of us to eat. He spoke while smiling with squinted eyes, leisurely returning to the kitchen. I still hadn't regained my composure. Is this really Mr. Fo? The man who once shocked the entire business world with just a glance, now wearing an apron, smiling broadly, holding a cooking spatula. I turned to look at Fo Lang. He was just looking at me, his expression relaxed. I told you, he's very gentle and loves to cook all kinds of dishes for you. I was speechless because my attention had been captivated by those two boxes. I quietly opened the large box first, almost blinded by the dazzling gold, a whole shiny piece. I swallowed. Receiving a gift like this was indeed both wealthy and classy. Next to me, Fo Lang poured me a cup of tea, his tone casual. That's the appetizer. I obediently opened the small box. The small box was a jewelry box, and inside was a jade bracelet. I had a bit of interest in gemstones and understood them somewhat. Just looking at that jade bracelet made my throat go dry. Fo Lang wasn't wrong. Compared to this bracelet, those few pounds of gold were really just an appetizer. I looked twice and then immediately put it back in the box. In the past, I felt very at ease taking money from Fo Lang, but after encountering a gift from an old man like this, I started to feel scared. After hesitating for a moment, even though I was a bit nervous, I decided to go into the kitchen to offer my help. To my surprise, Fo Lao Jia not only didn't chase me away but we surprisingly got along quite well. Fo Lao Jia dropped all his imposing demeanor. He cooked while I assisted, and we worked together seamlessly. I must admit he truly is multi-talented. From literature to business, even cooking skills are top-notch. Just a few simple dishes, and the aroma spread throughout the house. There were 3 of us, yet he made 6 dishes and a soup, all simple yet exquisite family meals. Fo Lao Jia invited us to the table, continuously telling me to feel at ease. Today, he was just an ordinary father, not the formidable vice president. And in that moment, I really was able to relax a bit. The affection Fo Lao Jia had for Fo Lang was truly undeniable love. The man who was once rumored to kill without blinking in the business world was now just lingering by the dining table, focused on serving fish and peeling shrimp for his son. Son, eat more fish and see if your dad's cooking skills have declined. Last month, I had something really joyful happen abroad, and I want to tell you about it. But Fo Lang didn't seem to care much. He maintained his usual cold expression, eating when served and nodding to acknowledge when spoken to. Watching the father on the other side seemingly obsessed with his son, I suddenly remembered what Fo Lang once said to Fo Loi Kin. If I want to compete for the position of heir, you don't stand a chance. At that time, I thought he was just being boastful, but now I believe it. I truly believe it. While I was still lost in thought, Fo Lao Jia seemed to have a sixth sense and proactively brought up that topic. He sighed, his face full of worry. Fo Lang, when will you finally take over your father's work? He said to his son, his gaze a mix of helplessness and affection, but Fo Lang clearly didn't like this topic. As soon as he heard it mentioned, he put down his chopsticks, maneuvered his wheelchair away from the table, and went to the bathroom. Once he left, I also felt it was inappropriate to continue eating, so I put down my chopsticks and pretended to calmly sip some tea. However, before I could swallow the tea, I noticed Fo Lao Jia's expression change completely. The gentle demeanor from before vanished without a trace. His eyes were now sharp as a knife, cold as ice, steadily directed at me. He silently tightened his grip on the teacup, tapping his fingers lightly on the cup before speaking slowly. Fo Lang may not know why you approached him, but I do. I stared blankly at Fo Lao Jia, my mind racing through the entire journey of getting to know Fo Lang, thinking to myself, why did I approach him? Of course, it was for the money. Moreover, Fo Lang knew that from the very beginning. I thought his next question would be how much money would make me leave Fo Lang. But I guessed wrong. The old man's cold gaze swept over me. What does your mother really want? I was stunned. What does this have to do with my mother? Fo Lao Jia stared at me intently, his scrutinizing gaze seeming to pierce through my soul. I felt a chill run down my spine, and sweat poured down me like a shower. After a long while, he finally withdrew his gaze, his brows furrowed tightly before gradually relaxing. He sighed, she really hasn't said anything to you, and I felt completely lost about what was happening. So what should my mother have said to me? Unable to contain my curiosity, I cautiously asked, I thought you would keep it a secret, but unexpectedly, just a few words from you revealed a gigantic secret that had been buried for many years. My mother was once the ex-girlfriend of the deputy master, referred to as the master, though in reality, he is not that pretentious, being nearly 20 years older than my mother. But what about him when he was young? Charming and talented, with wealth flowing like water. At that time, my mother didn't care about age and loved him passionately, until she was horrifically betrayed upon discovering he was already married. Because of that shock, my mother has lived alone ever since and can no longer have children. She can't have children, so what about me? I am the child she adopted from the orphanage. I have known this since I was little, but the other matter left me speechless, wanting to say something but not knowing how to open my mouth. Just then, Fo Lang returned, and for some reason, when the wheelchair stopped beside me, I immediately felt a sense of support, and my mind calmed down significantly. He tilted his head to look at me, his tone indifferent. Why aren't you eating? Before I could respond, he continued casually, is it not to your taste? Then looked at the deputy master, the cooking skills need to be practiced again. I looked up and saw the deputy master had returned to his previous gentle expression, smiling and nodding in agreement. Not only that, he immediately called his assistant, asking him to buy a few cookbooks, requesting delivery within half an hour. He said, Dad will learn again, won't let you down anymore. But Fo Lang didn't seem to care much. He put down his chopsticks without saying anything further and pushed the wheelchair away. I hurriedly followed behind. The deputy master called after him in a low voice, saying something like, just visit your dad more often. Dad is very lonely, but Fo Lang never looked back. Fo Lang took me to a hot pot restaurant. Brother Bao heard me say I wanted to eat hot pot last time. Steam rose thickly and mysteriously. I sat across from him, lost in thought. My mind was filled with the shocking stories the deputy master had just told. I had never thought my mother had such a deep and meaningful relationship with Fo Kin Quan. That man, famous throughout the business world. Lost in thought, a hand suddenly appeared in my line of sight, with long, slender fingers and clearly defined joints, beautifully captivating. He handed me a bowl of dipping sauce just the way I like it, thick fermented soy sauce. Fo Lang looked at me, slightly raising an eyebrow. Are you thinking about something? I nodded and then shook my head. The things the deputy master just mentioned, I didn't dare to casually bring up, but Fo Lang seemed to have guessed it. He took a sip of tea, his tone calm. He told you already. You confirmed I was still in a daze. He had called the waiter to change the tea to wine. As he poured the beer, he looked up at me, the corners of his mouth slightly curved as if smiling. He's not sincere, surely still hiding many things from you. Then he offered me the cup, wanting to hear it, right? I took the cup, nodding sincerely, wanting to. Fo Lang is indeed the kind of person you can get along with, ready to share secrets. After that, we finished 3 plates of beef brisket, drank 5 bottles of beer, and I got to hear the complete upgraded version of the love story between the deputy master and my mother. The beginning wasn't much different, still about the deputy master being heartless and deceitful, tricking my mother into thinking she had found her true love. When my mother was happily pregnant, he suddenly disappeared, leaving behind a large sum of money for their breakup. It was then that my mother learned he was already married. My mother has always been very stubborn, determined not to abort, wanting to keep the baby in her womb. But with Fo Kin Quan's character, how could he allow a woman to keep this child to later use as a bargaining chip against him? Therefore, he arranged for my mother to have an accident, causing her to lose the child in her womb. But accidents are hard to control. My mother was severely injured and could no longer have children for the rest of her life. Moreover, earlier, the deputy master briefly touched on how he hurt my mother. But he didn't mention a word about how my mother took her revenge. The part he didn't say, his son helped him tell instead. My mother, she's the kind of woman who is cold-blooded and quite toxic. After being betrayed that time, she completely fell apart, crying day and night, and even wanted to end it all a few times. After being saved, she seemed to have transformed into a different person, no longer sorrowful over love but completely reborn. Then she took the initiative to approach the deputy master, saying she wouldn't hold a grudge about the past, just there crying pitifully, clinging to him as if nothing had ever happened. My mother was originally a captivating and enchanting woman, otherwise, how could she make such a seasoned man like him infatuated? No matter how much he had played around or how many women he had met, he still fell into the trap. But just when they were close, my mother pulled out the scissors she had prepared beforehand and struck. From then on, the once carefree man, Fo Kin Kwan, could no longer be carefree. Fortunately, his official wife managed to give birth to a son for him, so there was still a continuation of the lineage. Unfortunately, that child was overly pampered, and at 17, while visiting the countryside, he carelessly fell into the water and drowned. Fo Lao Jia, who had only bled but never shed tears before, cried until his voice was hoarse that time. Later, he adopted Fo Loi Kin and sent people everywhere to search for Fo Lang, his illegitimate son. When found, Fo Lang was brought back to the Fo family home. But Fo Lang hated his status as a bastard child, forcing Fo Lao Jia not to reveal his identity, only to say he was a newly adopted son. The old man, with all his former grandeur, gradually faded away. Even though he still appeared as a cold and powerful elder in front of the public, behind the scenes, he cherished this child like a treasure. Whatever Fo Lang said, he would smile and nod, following along. Including the matter of Fo Lang saying he wanted to marry me, with his methods, he could easily uncover my background. However, he couldn't go against the wishes of this precious son. As for not attending the wedding, the reason was that Fo Lang did not allow it. The story ended, and my heart was still pounding non-stop. It was truly exhilarating. I took a sip of cold beer, feeling the chill running down my throat, wanting to exclaim, "My mother is indeed a boss." She dealt with that old man from the Fo family, who was once notorious as a tyrant in the business world, so decisively, it was just too cool. No wonder when I mentioned my mother earlier, even after decades, the old man's eyes were still so intense and red. If it were me, I would be even more excited. After eating to our fill, Fo Lang settled the bill and then took me home. I quietly followed behind, pushing his wheelchair, with many things I wanted to ask, but they kept getting swallowed back down. The whole way was silent. Upon arriving home, we went upstairs, both entering the bedroom naturally, without needing to say anything. I helped him onto the bed, while I sat on the edge on the other side. After a while of silence, I finally couldn't hold it in anymore and spoke up to ask what had been on my mind. "So, from the beginning, you knew my identity?" Fo Lang tilted his head to look at me, his pitch-black eyes deep and unfathomable. He nodded, "Yes." "Did you intentionally marry me?" "Yes." I bit my lip and asked softly. "Was it to take revenge on your father?" Because everyone could see that Fo Lang Kem hated Fo Lao Jia. Even though the old man now treated him like a treasure, humbling himself in every way to please him, unexpectedly, he shook his head. "No." His gaze locked onto me. "It's true that I deceived you about the contract marriage, but not to provoke him. So what is it for?" "I don't understand." "Aside from that reason, I really can't think of anything else that would make you intentionally choose to marry me. Even if you have imperfect legs, just your face and status alone would make countless girls eager to be with you. You just have to stretch out your hand and there will be a long line of beauties ready to obey. So why me?" Fo Lang lowered his head, his gaze still fixed on me, then he replied. The answer was as light as a breeze but made my heart tremble almost out of rhythm. "Because he wants to marry you but is afraid of scaring you away, so he uses the excuse of a contract marriage." I was left speechless by that answer. "But wasn't the wedding the first time we met?" Fo Lang looked at me for a long time, his long fingers gently pressed against his forehead, letting out a helpless sigh. "So you really don't recognize me?" I was bewildered. What should I have recognized? "You are the second young master of the Fo family, and I am just an ordinary girl, even an adopted one. Without this transactional marriage, we are basically from two different worlds. How can clouds and mud ever meet?" Fo Lang gently waved his hand. Come here. You have difficulty moving. I obediently moved closer and sat down beside him. Fo Lang raised his hand, gently stroking my head. Jianian, I once said, I am the illegitimate child of Fo Kin Quan. So do you know where I grew up? I shook my head. He looked up at me, slowly enunciating each word. At an orphanage. The orphanage was peaceful, my whole body shivered. I stared at his face, trying to dredge up memories, wanting to piece this face together with a vague figure from the past. There's a slight resemblance, but I can't believe it. I pointed at him and then at myself, opening my mouth to speak, but my throat choked up and no sound came out. Fo Lang gently brushed my hair, his fingertips lightly gliding over, his voice choked. It seems you still remember me. Tears fell from my eyes in an instant. Of course I remember. Back then, he wasn't named Fo Lang but was called Chunin Quan. Chu is his biological mother's surname. So Quan turns out to be Fo Kin Quan. And I didn't have the name Jianian back then. I was abandoned at birth, without a surname. The director gave me the name Quan Van. I was a child raised in an orphanage, without a father or mother. He originally had a mother, but she abandoned him. That year, he was brought to the orphanage when he was just 6 years old. In my memory, that boy had a very beautiful face but was pitifully thin. Pale skin, eyes always filled with sadness. Clearly, before being abandoned, he lived next to his biological mother, yet looking at him now, he resembled a severely malnourished child. Back then, he was weak, sensitive, and frighteningly frail. That small, skinny body looked as if a gentle breeze could blow him away. As the new member of the orphanage, he was often bullied by the other kids. In the end, I couldn't stand it anymore and stepped into the group of boys, pulling him out of the chaos. I was a little tough kid in the orphanage that few dared to mess with, but to protect him, I fought with those kids many times, ending up bruised. After several fierce battles, those kids finally stopped bothering him, leaving Fo Lang alone. From that day on, he became my little tail. Even when I went to the bathroom, he squatted outside the door to keep watch. When sleeping, his blanket would flow next to mine, and he had to secretly hold my hand to sleep peacefully. He was a deprived child, feeling an extreme sense of safety, at least back then. Under my special training, Fo Lang transformed from a weak little lamb into a small wolf. He started to grow taller, gaining some flesh, his face still youthful but increasingly attractive. And then I couldn't tell when the once timid child had become the unbeatable fighter in the orphanage. Anyone who dared to speak ill of me, he would immediately throw a punch, his eyes red as if wanting to eat someone. We became the formidable duo in the orphanage, which made others want to stay away even more. I felt a bit lonely, while he seemed very content, as if just being by my side every day was enough, but beautiful things eventually fade. After a while, I noticed Fo Lang changed. He became often startled, easily frightened, even starting to avoid my touch. At first, I was very angry, but later I accidentally discovered it was the director. That middle-aged woman who always appeared gentle and dignified was actually a person with a terrifying interest in children. And Fo Lang, with his gradually handsome face, became her new target. That night, Fo Lang escaped from the orphanage. When leaving, we didn't even have time to say a word to each other. Since then, I have never seen him again. In the following years, I often thought about him. I always believed that Fo Lang was probably no longer alive. With a 6-year-old child, whose personality was extremely sensitive, escaping from an orphanage during a time when society was still very poor, could he survive? I kept thinking about it. Perhaps in the current orphanages, there are still children like him from years ago, skinny, shy, weak, and extremely lacking in a sense of safety. But then I choked up thinking, perhaps no one would ever be as beautiful as he was. Even though his face hadn't truly blossomed back then, it was enough to leave people in awe. In awe to the point that many years later, even when I grew up, every time I recalled the memories of those years, I still remembered those fawn-like eyes. So when I grew up, I became someone who loved money immensely. But all the money I earned was used to donate to orphanages. Of course, not the one from back then. Every time I donated, I had to verify everything thoroughly before doing so. Later, a series of crimes by the former director were finally investigated, and she was sent to prison. All of that happened after I left the orphanage. Pulling myself away from the memories, I leaned my head against the headboard, quietly listening to Fo Lang recount his story after leaving the orphanage. He said after escaping from the orphanage, he wandered the streets but didn't dare to go too far. Because he was afraid that if he went too far, he would never get to see me again. He often secretly returned, standing from afar to watch me in the dark, but he didn't dare to come closer. He was afraid that if others found out, I would be implicated, and he also feared that just seeing me would make it hard for him to leave. Until one day I was adopted. The person who adopted me was my mother. Now, after I left, Fo Lang quietly followed, observing me from a distance for a while. He saw that my mother treated me very well. She devoted all her thoughts and feelings to me, taking care of me wholeheartedly. I lived very happily, and that's when he felt relieved to leave. As for me, when I left the orphanage that year, I had just turned 15. I was taken home by my mother and grew up in love from then on. My mother is a woman who lives brilliantly. She has clear likes and dislikes, loves money, and is quite fanciful. But even when she only had 5 coins in her pocket, she was still willing to spend 3 coins to buy bread for me, 1 coin for water, and the last coin to give to a beggar on the street. My mother is very beautiful and loves to wear red, the kind of bright red that no one dares to try. Her life is like a brilliant red rose blooming, dazzling to the eyes. Now I know that her marrying me off to Fo Lang might have had ulterior motives, but I don't hate her, truly don't hate her. Without her, there would be no me today. Is the night quiet now? Fo Lang's voice is warm and gentle as he continues to tell about his life. It was just that the years after that passed by very quickly. The pain and humiliation he once endured, he didn't want to recount in detail, and I didn't want to press for more. Then he said, later on, while still wandering on the streets, his biological mother found him. The person who hadn't cried for a long time like him cried. He thought his mother came to take him home, but she only took him to buy new clothes and treated him to some delicious food. Then she took him to the Fo family to seek a status. It was called a status, but she knew in her heart that it was impossible. She came only to extort money, having overestimated Fo Lang's position in Fo Kin Kwan's heart and underestimated his ruthlessness. Fo Kin Kwan has never been an easy person to manipulate. Just like back then when he coldly ordered to harm my mother. And this time was no different. After driving Fo Lang and his mother away, he quietly spent money to buy his mother's life. It was Fo Lang who saved her, and because of that, he permanently lost his legs, but in the end, he still couldn't save her. He hadn't even had time to clearly feel the motherly love he had just found before losing her forever. He hated his mother even more, and hated Fo Kin Kwan. After all, he was still his biological father. Fo Kin Kwan then took him to a private hospital to find the best doctor for treatment, and transferred a huge amount of money into his account, enough for him to live comfortably for a lifetime. But no matter how much money he had, he couldn't heal Fo Lang's legs and soul. After that, Fo Lang left, relying only on that money. A man in a wheelchair ventured into the underground business world, carving out a position for himself. Recalling these things, Fo Lang frowned slightly, his eyes flashing with a fierce glint just like the little wolf cub from years ago. A few seconds later, he quickly retracted his emotions and continued, a few years ago, the son Kwok Bao that Fo Kin Kwan and his legal wife that had together had an accident and died. He cried like a madman and realized he had no heirs left. In that pain, he remembered he still had a lost child out there. Then, he used all his connections to find Fo Lang. It was just that Fo Lang refused to acknowledge his roots and wouldn't allow him to reveal their identities to outsiders. Fo Kin Kwan agreed to everything. He knew Fo Lang hated him but still took steps to bow his head and try to make amends after many years of being abandoned. For many years, Lang Bat's most painful memory was knowing that Fo Lang was sitting with his biological mother while still coldly plotting against her. To put it bluntly, from the very beginning, Fo Kin Kwan never cared about your life or death. He didn't intend to kill you, but if you died in that accident, he wouldn't care either. Later, when Fo Lao Jia wanted to choose a wife for Fo Lang, my mother took the initiative to approach him. She smiled brightly and said she wanted to introduce someone to him. That person was me. Fo Lang immediately agreed. My mother demanded a betrothal gift of 10 million, and he didn't haggle. And then, just 10 minutes before the wedding ceremony, was the first time in all those years that we officially met again to rekindle our feelings. When I learned everything, I looked back at every gentle action that I had previously thought was polite or pretentious, and suddenly had a completely different answer. For example, that day at the Fo family party, I casually mentioned that the pastries were delicious, and when I left, he actually wrapped some up to take home for me. I tiptoed down to eavesdrop, and instead of scolding me, he pulled me onto his lap, afraid I would get cold feet. When Fo Doi Kin deliberately acted ambiguously with me, Fo Lang's gaze was like he wanted to kill. It turned out that everything was not just an act. That night, Fo Lang brought out the wine again. We drank a lot and talked a lot. In a lonely night, in the sweet intoxication of the wine, when two people let down their guard and open their hearts to each other, something is bound to happen. For example, he kissed my lips, and I trembled, closed my eyes, and actively responded to him. The rumors were false, Fo Lang was not as the world claimed, and there was another rumor saying his legs were just a pretense. Unfortunately, this rumor was also wrong. Fo Lang really had a condition with his legs. However, in a tender moment, he leaned down to my ear and whispered softly, "Don't worry, my legs can still be treated." He said that if he wasn't sure his legs could recover, he wouldn't have chosen to marry me. I wanted to shake my head to tell him it was okay, that I didn't care about that, and that no matter how he was, I could accept him. But with my lips taken over by him, I couldn't say a word. That night, the moon was very gentle. Fo Lang was the same, everything that had been hidden was now exposed. We had finally transformed from a contractual marriage into a real husband and wife. The wedding ceremony was held, and we also had the marriage certificate. Now even our relationship as a couple was truly fulfilling. Since that night, Fo Lang seemed to have turned into a different person. In front of outsiders, he still appeared cold and distant. But when it was just the two of us, he resembled the little tail from years ago, clinging to me without letting go. A few days later was Fo Lao Jia's birthday, and this time it wasn't a small family gathering like before, but a large-scale birthday party. 2 days before the party, Fo Lao Jia personally called Fo Lang, cautiously asking if he planned to attend. Fo Lang answered the phone very indifferently and then turned to look at me. Seeing me nod, he finally agreed. On the day of the birthday, Fo Lang held my hand as we went together to attend. The party was held at a hotel owned by the Fo Group, in a grand banquet hall that could accommodate thousands of people. As soon as Fo Lang appeared at the entrance, Fo Lao Jia hurried over to greet him. But just halfway there, Fo Lao Jia was stopped in his tracks by Fo Lang's cold gaze, forced to pause and awkwardly smile, not daring to advance further. Everyone around looked a bit puzzled, but no one dared to say anything more. After all, in the eyes of the world, Fo Lang was just a disabled adopted son who was not favored. At this moment, Fo Yuyan stepped forward, smiling as she greeted Fo Lang. But in her carefully made-up eyes, there was nothing but jealousy and suppressed infatuation. A truly eccentric woman, she loves madly, yet puts on an air of arrogance, teasing and mocking, as if by doing so she would no longer be the pitiful one in love without reciprocation. Fo Lang still didn't bother to glance at her. Until she shifted her focus to me, Fo Yuyan mocked the evening gown I wore today. In a sarcastic tone, she said, "I don't belong in places like this." I turned around, and sure enough, Fo Lang's face had darkened in front of so many guests. He glanced at Fo Yuyan and then gently said to me, "It's okay, everyone has a different definition of class." In her perception, perhaps a big waist and short neck were what defined class. Fo Yuyan wrapped her arms around her neck, her face turning green and then white, so angry that she almost cried on the spot, not daring to leave. At this moment, Fo Doi Kin appeared just in time, using the pretext of the greater good to quietly stand in for Fo Yuyan. He put on a righteous face, taking on the role of the elder brother to reprimand, saying that today was their father's birthday, and the two siblings had just met and already caused a scene. Fo Lang frowned impatiently and interrupted after hearing half of what was said. "Are you done talking?" With that, he took my hand and led me straight to the center of the banquet hall. There, Fo Lao Jia was surrounded like a star surrounded by the moon. But his eyes were only focused on one person, Fo Lang. Thinking back, it was indeed bittersweet. Fo Kin Quan, the man who once roamed the business world, with ruthless tactics and a cold heart, had treated outsiders cruelly, even his own family. But time does not spare anyone. As one reaches old age, the heart gradually softens. After tasting enough glory, wealth, and power, what he wanted was just the simplest thing: to have his descendants gathered around him, enjoying his old age. Unfortunately, his wife died young, and his eldest son also died in an accident, leaving only an illegitimate child whom he had once harmed to the point of disability, who refused to acknowledge their family. At this point, perhaps for Fo Kin Quan, it was more painful than bankruptcy, yet no one felt pity for him. Anyone who heard this would just want to coldly say, "Serves him right." Fo Lang still kept his old habit of leading me to a secluded corner with few people. I looked towards Tom, the girl standing not far away, and suddenly felt a twinge of jealousy. I gently tugged at his sleeve and asked softly, "You used to like her, didn't you?" Fo Lang was taken aback. He turned to look at me, his expression suddenly becoming strangely serious. "Who told you that?" I shook my head. "No one, it's just my guess." Then I recounted to him what happened at the previous family party. I had seen him continuously looking in on Tom's direction. After hearing this, Fo Lang laughed. "No." He raised his glass and took a sip of wine, slowly saying, "To me, she is like a non-blood-related sister. When I was wandering outside, she helped me a lot. Later, it was because of me that she got to know Fo Doi Kin." At this point, Fo Lang sighed softly. The last time he saw her following Fo Doi Kin, he only felt heartache. He always felt guilty for pushing her into the fire pit. I hesitated, but at that moment, his gaze was indeed very warm. Fo Lang was amused by me. He gently stroked my hair, his voice full of indulgence. "How could it be warm? You really have a vivid imagination. I just feel it's a pity that someone who once helped me is now following someone who doesn't care for her." I breathed a sigh of relief, understanding his feelings. Due to his childhood experiences, Fo Lang was actually someone who appeared cold on the outside but was warm on the inside. He remembered everyone who had helped him, and he certainly did not forget those who had harmed him. But I still found it hard to understand. If he publicly revealed his identity to warn Fo Doi Kin to treat her well, he certainly wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Fo Lang shook his head, saying that relationships couldn't be forced with violence, it still had to be a mutual agreement. He only felt that she had chosen the wrong person, but what happened afterward was her choice, and he wouldn't interfere. I listened attentively and nodded. Fo Lang was indeed very clear-headed. While I was still pondering, he suddenly tugged at my sleeve. I looked down to see him gripping my wrist tightly. With just a little force, I fell into his arms. I looked down to see him gripping my wrist tightly. With just a little force, I fell into his arms. I was pulled down by him, forced to lean forward. Fo Lang looked up at me, his gaze intense. We had barely been facing each other for 3 seconds when his Adam's apple moved slightly, and then he kissed my lips, a warm and gentle feeling. Immediately after, he let go. I sat up in a daze, still not understanding why he suddenly kissed me. Fo Lang spoke, his voice light as a breeze, but his eyes held a hint of a smile. "Remember this well, the way he looked at you just now is what we call passionate, but when he looks at others, it's not the same." I felt my face flush, not expecting him to care about that so much. Just when the atmosphere between us was filled with sweetness, on the other side, old Master Fo suddenly announced a shocking news: "Fo Lang is not my adopted son but my biological son." The entire hall fell silent for a few seconds, then erupted. The whole city knew that Fo Kin Quan had only one son in his lifetime, but that son had died in an accident long ago. In recent years, he had only adopted 3 people, 1 boy and 2 girls. Among those 3, Fo Lang was the most underestimated and looked down upon by the whole family. Everyone assumed that Fo Loi Kin was the true heir of the Fo family. But now Fo Lang suddenly changed roles, from an adopted son to the only bloodline of the family. All the gazes in the banquet hall shifted, everyone's hearts were in turmoil. In recent years, many people had worked hard to win Fo Loi Kin's favor. Every time the two appeared together at a party, people would intentionally or unintentionally ignore Fo Lang. Unexpectedly, everyone had placed their bets wrong, thinking this was the climax of the party. Who would have thought my mother would show up? She arrived dressed splendidly, with an unmatched aura. A bright red dress like blood made her fair skin stand out stunningly. With wavy curly hair and dark red lips, everything blended into a dazzling beauty that was almost blinding. Close to 50 years old, time had left traces on her face, but it also brought a mature and alluring beauty. My mother walked up to me, her gaze sweeping over my hand tightly intertwined with Fo Lang's, and the smile on her lips deepened. She didn't say anything to me but went straight to Fo Kin Quan. The two faced each other. I once thought old Master Fo would be furious, but he only silently looked at her and softly said, "You've come." As if he had known she would arrive. And thus, the grandest birthday party in the business world was abruptly concluded by her appearance. Old Master Fo and my mother went upstairs. No one knew what they talked about. Neither did Fo Lang and I. It wasn't until the next day that I received a call from the police station saying my mother had confessed and was then arrested. According to her testimony, she had killed someone. That person was the biological son of Fo Kin Quan, the young master of the Fo family who had died before the age of 18. That year, the boy was only 17, living in luxury and spoiled to the heavens. After old Master Fo lost his ability to have children, this only son was almost his entire world. As long as he wanted it, everything had to be his. He dressed extravagantly, lived arrogantly, and was reckless. At 17, he secretly ran back to the countryside to play. Having never known the scent of the fields, he was excited as if discovering a new world. And then he met a little girl. When forced, it used a stone to hit the girl. Fortunately, the girl's mother arrived in time. During the struggle, she pushed it into the river. And that girl was me. I don't clearly remember that night. When I woke up, I was at home in my mother's arms. She simply said, "I arrived just in time. She chased that bastard away." I thought everything like that was over. I had no idea that the mother I loved had killed someone, let alone that the person was the son of one of the most powerful people in this city. Each of these fateful ties is difficult to sever. He once deceived her, betrayed her, left her desperate in love, made her lose her child, and lost her ability to be a mother. She didn't just incapacitate him once but also killed his child herself. The past circles around in a cycle of vengeance. The term fateful ties seems too light. I hurried to the police station, wanting to see my mother, but the police told me she didn't want to see me. I tried many times, but each time was in vain. I had no choice but to return home. I begged Fo Lang to hire the best lawyer to help my mother. But my mother didn't live to see that day. She passed away in the detention center, not at 44 but due to a serious illness. She was already in the final stage. I didn't have time to ask her a word, didn't have time to say mom before everything ended. If it weren't for Fo Lang by my side, I fear I wouldn't have been able to get through it. He always accompanied me, taking on the role of son-in-law, handling everything from start to finish. At the funeral, I stared blankly at my mother's black and white portrait. The colorless photo made one think of a bright red, the red of a dress, the red of lips, the red of her entire life. My mother was a brilliant, fiery, and bold rose, yet now only gray ashes remain. After the funeral, I returned home, wanting to enter my mother's room when I unexpectedly discovered a letter she left behind. In the letter, she clearly wrote that everything was part of her plan. Before she died, she wanted to see me get married, to marry the right person. That person had known me since I was a child, had watched over me for many years, and wholeheartedly remembered me. It was Fo Lang. That man, though crippled, had extraordinary abilities to protect me for a lifetime. Before my mother left, she wanted to meet Fo Kin Quan one last time, just to look at the man she had loved and hated all her life. In a letter, my mother wrote that she once wanted to live brilliantly like a flower, yet she met Fo Kin Quan. When they met, she was just over 20, the most beautiful age of a person's life. He, on the other hand, had passed 40, mature, and with just a few sweet words, easily held her in the palm of his hand. They loved and hated each other, entangled for a lifetime, and in the end, it was unclear who owed whom more. In the letter, my mother also mentioned the events of the past in the countryside. She said that when she arrived, my clothes had almost been completely taken off. If she had arrived just a minute late, perhaps I would no longer be pure. In a fit of rage, she rushed up to stop it, pushing it into the river. At first, she intended to go down to save, but when the moonlight illuminated the face of that person, she realized it was the son of Fo Kin Quan, the one who had ruined her life, now wanting to do the same to her daughter. It was indeed a case of retribution. That night, my mother stood by the river for a long time, hesitating, torn, but in the end, she still did not go into the water. She ignored the young master of the Fo family as he gradually sank to the bottom of the river, without a moment of hesitation. In the second half of the letter, my mother clearly explained the reason for marrying me off to Fo Lang. She had investigated and knew that he had lived with me in the orphanage and had a very good relationship with me. She also knew that all these years he had been silently watching over and protecting me. Only after confirming that could she feel at ease marrying me off to him. As for using me to take revenge on Fo Kin Quan, my mother never thought of that. The handwriting was like that of a free-spirited person. The letter was several pages long, and every stroke carried her familiar tone. She wrote that in this lifetime, she couldn't distinguish who owed whom. So there was no need for you to take revenge on my behalf. My mother only hoped for me to live happily. Even if the one who brought that happiness was the son of Fo Kin Quan, she didn't care. The grudges were her business, while you and Fo Lang were the future, unrelated to her. The last page of the letter was mostly blank, with just one sentence that, once read, I could no longer hold back. The handwriting was somewhat careless, yet each word and stroke was painfully clear. In this lifetime, my mother could not give birth. Thank you for being willing to be her child. Love you, daughter. I clutched the letter tightly, tears streaming down my face. The one who should really say thank you is actually me. I was abandoned at birth. It was she who, despite having no blood relation, took me in, raised me, and gave me a home to rely on. Before coming to this world, I chose my mother in heaven. It's just that I chose the wrong person and ended up being abandoned. 7 years later, she appeared, brought me home, as if helping me correct a wrong decision of my own. Along with the letter, she left me a bank card. The password was my birthday, and inside was her lifetime savings along with the bride price that Fo Lang had once given. She didn't spend a single penny, everything was saved for me. Coincidentally, on the day of my mother's memorial, Fo Lao Jia also passed away. He left this world in his sleep. When the maid discovered it, he had already lost his breath. Upon receiving the news, Fo Lang was silent for a long time. He quietly turned off his phone, quietly went to see him for the last time, and then quietly organized the funeral. Fo Lao Jia had long prepared a will, leaving all his assets without a single penny to Fo Lang. As for Fo Loi Kin and Fo Yuyan, despite being adopted, they received no inheritance whatsoever. This method truly matched Fo Kin Quan's way of life. A person who prioritized interests above all else, never putting family ties into consideration. Not only was he indifferent, but he was also extremely ruthless. He was a narcissist to the core, selfish in life and even in death. He did not forget to calculate for himself. He would rather leave his lifetime accumulation to an illegitimate child than give even a symbolic penny to his 2 adopted children. Therefore, at that funeral, Fo Loi Kin and Fo Yuyan didn't even bother to show up. After sending off the guests, I stood beside Fo Lang. He sat in a wheelchair, silently staring at the gravestone in front of him. The black and white portrait engraved on the stone cast a layer of sorrow over his serious face. I didn't know what to say, I could only stand quietly beside him. The wind gently brushed by. After a while, Fo Lang spoke up. He laughed, his voice tinged with mockery. Do you know why he tried so hard to win your favor in his later years? I replied softly, is it to make up for you? Fo Lang shook his head, not for you, but for himself. He never loved you, his own flesh and blood. Even when he tried to win favor and make amends, it was just to fill the void in his heart. He lived his whole life in power and prestige, but the one thing he lacked was his children. After losing his ability to procreate, the son he cherished the most died unexpectedly. He should have been alone for the rest of his life, but fortunately, he still had you, his illegitimate child. That's why he tried every means to hold on and make up, not out of love, but to make himself seem less pitiful. The corners of Fo Lang's mouth curled slightly, a smile full of sarcasm, but in his eyes, there was a faint red glow. He had never loved anyone, only himself, yet no matter how hard he tried to win favor, he remained as pitiable as ever. In his entire life, no one was truly sincere beside him. His wife Trung Tui was neglected and humiliated by him to the point of dying in resentment. My mother, who loved him, was harmed her entire life. If one day he goes bankrupt, no one will be willing to stay and look at him even once more. A person like him is destined to be alone until the end of his life. Yet that day, Fo Lang still shed a tear at the grave of Fo Kin Quan. He said this tear was to bid him farewell on his final journey, and also to sever all those unmemorable pasts. All the grudges, rights and wrongs, resentments, and accusations would turn to dust with life and death. What remains for us is a completely new future. The next plan is to treat Fo Lang. The treatment progressed very smoothly, but in the middle of it, an unexpected event occurred. 2 red lines appeared in the bathroom, and they were mine. I am pregnant. The baby came as a surprise, disrupting all plans, but it also brought a glimmer of hope. It's like after the storms, a new life is quietly sprouting, just like the tiny being growing inside me. From that day on, Fo Lang's biggest hobby was hugging a dictionary to look up names. As a result, every night I was dragged along by him, dreaming together about our child's name from A to Z. Later, I got annoyed and seriously declared, don't think anymore, I'll choose the name for the child. Fo Lang nodded seriously. So what do you plan to name it? I absent-mindedly replied while drinking warm water. If it's a boy, the name will be Fo Kui, and if it's a girl, it will be Fo Kui Hoa. How about that? I even praised myself. Listen to this. Fo Kui Hoa is indeed a flower of wealth in the world. Fo Lang was silent for a moment, then pulled me into his arms, leaning close to my ear, his voice low enough to make one feel a tingle. How about we have triplets? One named Fo Kui, one Fo Kui Hoa, and the last one named Fo Mac for life. I laughed so hard I could hardly breathe in his arms, tightening my arms around his waist. Then why not just have a 4th child? The name would be Fo Hang. Laughter echoed in my ears. Fo Lang held me tighter, his voice softening. All right then. Then he said seriously, if it's a girl, the name will be Fo Van. The moonlight outside the window was hazy and gentle, but his voice was warmer than the moonlight. Naming her like this, the baby will be like the little girl in the orphanage years ago. Wearing a white dress, when she smiles, her eyes are crescent-shaped. How about that, my dear? I nestled into his chest, looking up just in time to see the moonlight outside the window. The childhood time I spent with Fo Lang has long passed, but the moon hanging in the night sky tonight is still just like the moon from back then. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. I truly appreciate your comments, suggestions, and feelings. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel.